Welcome to Photojournalism Now in Conversation. I'm Alison Stieven-Taylor. In this video, I'm chatting with Sean Gallagher, a photographer and filmmaker based in Beijing. Sean's work focuses on environmentalism and biodiversity, and for the past 15 years, he's been covering the Asian continent. So welcome, Sean, and thanks so much for agreeing to be part of this series.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm really pleased to be part of it.
So, Sean, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the way that you're working, given that you have to do extensive travel for the stories that you cover?
Well, like for everybody, it's been a difficult period, difficult start to 2020. I mean, being based here in China at the epicenter of where the outbreak started, we've been feeling the effects of lockdowns, etc., really since mid-January. So we've had over 6 months of the effects of both lockdowns, travel restrictions, Beijing then opening up and then being closed down again because of the second wave here. So there's been multiple problems just with daily life, just from just being here in China. But then also, of course, with the nature of my work, I'm always traveling, always going to different countries. And obviously there have been huge restrictions on that. So my travel has been reduced drastically over the past 6 months. I'm lucky because the last major project that I did, I was able to do just before the world really went into lockdown. So I went to Cambodia in late January, in the last week of January, the first couple of weeks of February. And I was working on a new story looking at deforestation and forest fires in Cambodia. I'd read about this story in early 2019, and I decided to go to Cambodia during the dry season, which is the worst time for forest fires. In Cambodia and throughout Southeast Asia during this time of the year, a lot of the agricultural land is burnt by farmers. And there is also an incredible amount of deforestation where the forests are being cleared to make way for agricultural land. So with the help from the Pulitzer Center, I traveled to Cambodia for 3 weeks to produce a story to try to visually convey this destruction and this vast amount of burning and deforestation that's taking place there. So I spent my time in a couple of different places, a couple of different national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, using a lot of drone photography, which I've incorporated into my work over the past few years, but also doing slightly more traditional photojournalism, spending time on the ground with people such as conservationists, military police, and also even vigilante farmers who go out on patrols in the forests in Cambodia, trying to stop poaching and trying to stop the illegal harvesting of timber there. So it was a really multifaceted look at what is happening, what are the causes of deforestation, and also what are the effects and how it's affecting the people of Cambodia in the regions that I visited. I'll always work with local fixers, local translators who are always there to help me communicate with the people that I'm either staying with, that I'm traveling with, or that I'm most importantly photographing, that they know what I'm doing and why I'm there. As long as they're okay with my presence and they understand why I'm there and the intentions of my work, that's one of the most important things. And that runs through all my projects, whether it's in Cambodia or my work in Tuvalu or in China. Communicating to your subjects about your intentions with the work is really important.
Sean, let's have a chat about a couple of images in this series. So what's happening in this picture?
So in this image, what you're seeing is the American conservationist. His name is Ben Davis. In this picture, he has a chainsaw which has been confiscated from some local farmers, which we found during one of the patrols. What he will do is confiscate anything he finds that he thinks is connected to poaching or logging. And so at his home in the forest, he has a huge collection of chainsaws. maybe 50 plus, which he regularly confiscates and then either destroys or sends to the local authorities. In this picture, he's talking to one of the rangers that he works with, and they're discussing the plan about what to do with some of the things that they found. And in that particular instance, as well as the chainsaw, they also found some skulls of animals that they believe had been poached.
I think it's really interesting when you get the context of the picture through your discussion, and obviously you would get that through captions as well, because looking at that picture, the guy with the chainsaw, Ben, could well be somebody who is, participating in this deforestation.
Yes, absolutely. Captions are incredibly important, and all of my images come with detailed captions about who, what, where, why, and when.
This picture with what looks like pans hanging off all of these trees, I just find this really visually intriguing, and I wondered if you could tell us what's going on here.
Well, I'm glad you're intrigued. That's one of the things that I do try to aim for when I'm out photographing. I'd like to try to create images that are a little bit ambiguous, a little bit unclear, that make you stop and question just what is happening here. And this particular image was taken on a rubber plantation in central Cambodia. And this is a really important part of the story because a lot of forest clearance in Cambodia is occurring because of agriculture, expanding agriculture, and predominantly rubber plantations. Rubber is a huge export commodity from Cambodia. So a lot of Cambodia's forests have sadly been converted from forest into these rubber plantations. So this lady was collecting rubber in those buckets that she's holding. And she was collecting those early one morning on a rubber plantation that we visited. And each small cup would catch the rubber from the cuts that they made in the trees. And then they would pour that into the larger buckets. And then the larger buckets would be transferred to a small tanker, which would then be taken to the factory for processing.
A lot of these images have an artistic aesthetic. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that in terms of, when we're trying to convey really serious issues like climate change, is there a risk between the aesthetic beauty of the image overpowering the journalistic message?
It's incredibly important that I try to create images that visually arrest you, images that almost stop you in your tracks and make you not want to look away. They kind of draw you in, even though that they are often depicting things which are showing something that are difficult to look at, such as environmental destruction. And as you know from seeing many of my other pictures, I often visit places that are really badly affected in terms of the environment. And so it's really important for me to use photography in a way that really captures my viewer's attention, even if it's of things that are difficult to look at. I think that's extremely important. I personally don't see a conflict there, because I think there's no point in me going to these places and making poorly composed or poorly lit images that you don't even remember, you don't even think about after you flicked past it on the website or on some social media. I want you to stop scrolling. I want you to stop as you walk past that image. And I want you to want to know what's happening. And I think by making a photograph, quote unquote, beautiful to look at or visually interesting to look at, I think that's the most important thing that we can do as photographers.
Sean and I also had a chat about how COVID-19 has impacted the news agenda in terms of what editors are interested in.
The reaction to COVID-19 has had impacts, far and wide, obviously. But in terms of the impacts on photojournalism, what I've found is that for me, as someone covering issues related to the climate and other environmental issues, I found that the news cycle over the past 6 months, 5 to 6 months, has really been exclusively focused on, obviously, COVID-19, obviously movements like the Black Lives Matter movement. And this has actually pushed out stories connected to the climate and the environment. And while obviously what's happening with COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movements are incredibly important, I feel that the issues surrounding climate have been almost forgotten by the mainstream media. And it's a real shame because having covered these issues for the past 10 or 15 years, I have seen an increase in coverage of these types of issues. And obviously, climate change is now something that is talked about regularly, which is fantastic. But the past 6 months, I feel we've almost gone in the complete opposite direction. And a lot of these stories have also been really forgotten about. And I've been trying to get the Cambodia Burning story published for the past 5 months. And I've just been met with, I've met a lot of hurdles because most of the editors who I've worked with before, who love my work, have just not been able to publish a story because they've been under pressure just to produce stories connected to these other issues. And so I've had to be really patient in trying to find a good outlet that will be able to publish a story. And thankfully, I found a publication who is going to publish the story, an international publication, who's going to thankfully do the story justice. But it means that everything has been moved almost 5 or 6 months down the line in terms of planning on when this was going to be published.
Sean is also publishing a limited edition magazine, so let's have a look at the trailer. So let's segue into talking about how Sean has diversified and also moved into filmmaking with his work on the environment.
With a lot of my projects now, I do both photojournalism, but I also do a short film, anywhere in the region of 5 to 10 minutes to go with my projects. And I just feel that by incorporating film and video storytelling through documentary storytelling, I really feel that I can add a different dimension to some of my stories, because not every story is suited to a photo essay, and not every story is suited to a documentary short film. And I think you can communicate an issue in different ways by using those different mediums. And I found filmmaking a really exciting way to try to convey some of the issues that I'm covering.
One of Sean's recent projects is on the island nation of Tuvalu, and he's also shot a short film for this project, as well as a series of stills, and also produced a limited edition magazine. And as you'll see in this short clip, he's used drone footage to give a different perspective.
I'm really interested in this sort of, moving in multiple directions and really taking on that kind of entrepreneurial spirit where you're not just producing the work as a creator, but you're also finding new ways to distribute it.
So I think it's really important, especially as a freelancer. You have to be, as you said, entrepreneurial. You have to be thinking of different ways to get these stories out there, because obviously you invest a lot of time. Sometimes you invest your own money into covering these stories. And so you want them to get the audience that you think that needs to see them. So I learned pretty quickly that just shooting a traditional photo essay wasn't really going to be enough for me. So that's why I started getting into filmmaking more, so that I could produce short documentaries about these topics. But then also going into producing, like you mentioned, limited edition magazines, which I sell to my audience that follow me on Instagram, Facebook, social media. And I think it just gives the project more life, really, and more opportunities to reach different audiences and expand the potential reach of the project. And I really enjoy it. I don't see it as something that has had a detrimental effect on my work. If anything, it's had the opposite effect. And I really enjoy trying to find different ways in which I can use the work and get it to new audiences.
Sean, it's been fabulous chatting with you, and your work is just brilliant. So thank you so much again for taking the time to share your stories with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm really glad you found the stories interesting, and I hope people will want to explore some of these issues a little bit more. And if they want to find me on social media and ask questions, then they can find me there.